Good afternoon. My name is John Kellum. I work with Richie and Carly at Manning Fulton as part of their franchise practice group. We've got two people to introduce here. The first is Drew McWilliams from Franchise Realty Partners, which was started as a children's preschool with his wife in 2007 and has since grown to over 60 locations, either currently open or under development across the United States. After years of operating in both the franchise and real estate space, Drew identified the disconnect between what third-party real estate companies offer and what franchisors need. And so he founded Franchise Realty Partners to leverage his over 20 years of real estate experience to help mitigate the pain points associated with commercial real estate selection for franchise brands. The second of your next two speakers is Ms. Jessica Elliott. She's a partner at Manning Fulton's real estate practice with over 20 years of commercial real estate experience. Jessica has represented clients on a variety of real estate needs, including commercial leasing, acquisitions and sales, and real estate financing. Serving as in-house counsel for a large commercial landlord and developer, Jessica has gained a unique perspective which allows her to effectively and efficiently help clients with their commercial real estate needs. Jessica routinely works with Manning Fulton's franchise clients on their real estate issues. So if you would help me greet these two speakers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Because we are here with Manning Fulton, I thought it was only right to do a icebreaker joke about attorneys. What do you think? Will that lighten up the crowd? I'm not gonna look at Richie because I did not ask him permission beforehand, okay? What is the difference between a good lawyer and a great lawyer? Anybody? Jessica? A good lawyer knows the law. A great lawyer knows the judge. Come on, that was good. This is as PC as I can get. So here's what we're talking about with you today. First of all, I hope you are well caffeinated because Richie gave Jessica and I the 3:30 slot after lunch, which is probably when everybody needs the most amount of caffeine, right? So we're gonna try to make this as interactive as possible, ask questions, and then we poll the audience, and we definitely have left time at the end to ask questions of us as much as possible. So a little bit of background on myself, and Jessica and I are gonna go back and forth. So again, my name is Drew McWilliams. I'm here to talk to you about real estate today, specifically. To give you a little bit of background, I am both a franchisor and also I am a vendor speaking with you today about real estate specifically. So how does that work, okay? So my wife and I own a children's preschool business called Ivy Brook Academy. We started 16 years ago, and as of yesterday, we just awarded our 64th location. We are operating in Thank you, I wasn't ready for that applause in here. We operate out of 14 different states. We've been franchising for the last 6 years. So we've gone from 2 units to 64 units in 6 years. I will take out 2 of those years because we're not going to talk about those 2 years that we all know about. We, as Ivy Brook Academy, we work with Manning Fulton and have a great relationship with Carly and Richie, and they've done an amazing job. First of all, who works with Manning Fulton right now? Great. By show of hands, who does not work with Manning Fulton yet? Great, because you all should be. Okay, so outstanding. They do a great job. I'm thoroughly impressed with the work that they do. So how does real estate come in and why am I up here on this panel? I'm still wanting to know, A, if I'll get invited back after that attorney joke, but also let me fill in some gaps here. As I've had my real estate license for over 21 years, I'm a real estate broker in the Carolinas, plural, because we're one big state here. This is what I've done basically my whole career is real estate. Even when Ivy Brook Academy got started, I was still the one-man real estate department. It is my background. It is what I love to do. But when we started franchising, I started coming to conferences like this, started going to IFA, some other events, and I have a great ability to connect with other franchisors, all peers in the same room. And everybody would always say three of the biggest pain points I foresee as a franchisor are hiring, construction, and real estate. So when people were asking me, what do I do for those three things to solve those problems? And I said, well, I do the real estate myself, and it hasn't become a burden or hasn't become a problem. Then I had other peers and other friends say, can you do it for me? So I spend zero money on marketing, launched the company 2 years ago. We now have 12 clients for Franchise Realty Partners. I have 4 people on staff full-time in the last 2 years. And very much like that, it is a boutique real estate firm. Our 12 clients range anywhere from the amazing Cody and Meredith in the back row from Mad Splatter, hey, to our biggest client is Quiznos. Yes, they're still around. They are not bankrupt yet. So from all walks of life, from emerging franchisors to corporate America. I love working on the real estate side with emerging brands, I must admit, more than anyone else, because I've been there and I definitely understand, going from 0 to 64, what that looks like. So I've had a great amount of people surround me and support me, and I'm happy to be able to return the favor. So as far as real estate, here's what we want to do. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, real estate and what to look for really in a lease. Show of hands, here's another poll the audience question. How many of you are in brick and mortar locations? Okay. How many of you are service-based brands? Okay, so it's about a 50-50 mix right here, okay? So what we're gonna talk about today is really, the goal is learning the importance of, from the franchisee's perspective, what they need to consider before signing a lease. And I know that sounds like common sense, but some things to consider, hopefully, that we'll bring out of this discussion today will help you as a franchisor in what to look for, but also what your franchisees should look for as well. Many people always say, as you hear, in real estate, what is the most important thing? Location, location, location. Again, poll the audience question, because it's 3:30 in the afternoon. How many have heard location, location, location before when it comes to real estate? Whether it's your own primary residence or whether it is your retail and your business space. Now, location, location, location makes sense, but there is kind of an add-on to that. It depends is part of that. What location, location, location matters to you isn't necessarily what your franchisee is thinking about. And here's what that means. Let me break that down a little bit for you here. For each of you, and you're more than likely, first of all, franchisors in the audience. Franchisors. Okay, so franchisors, you understand exactly what is integral for your locations if you are brick and mortar, right? And I promise we're going to try to do some value-added content for our service-based brands that don't have brick and mortar here today. You know exactly what that means. I'll pick on Ivybrook a little bit, but with Ivybrook, I know that we specifically look for, I look for B locations in an A site. What does that mean? It means that I don't want to be on the front corner of Main and Main where banks and gas stations go. That's very expensive real estate. I love town centers that I can be tucked in the back, very, very back, not only for safety reasons, because all of our locations have playgrounds, but also because the further back I get in the development, then the less visibility I have, and the less I'm going to be paying in a rent factor. Those things are extremely important to our brand because I need convenience. I am not a drop-by location that you're seeing, oh, a Starbucks or a Chick-fil-A logo, let me pull in there and impulse buy. That's not how a children's preschool works. People are going to do referral-based or they're going to do online inquiries, and I'm a destination. So I want to be a convenient location, which is why I want an A center, but a B location, or you can call it a B location and an A center, you can call it either way, so I can get that. Now that is important to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean, even when we bring franchise candidates in for a discovery day, that even though I show them that location and I talk to them about that kind of location, that real estate play, that when I send them back to Houston, Texas or Denver, Colorado, that translates. they might think in their mind, location, location, location means I need to be on the corner of Main and Main. And your job as a franchisor is talk to them, be able to explain the difference of what it is that they're looking for, and realize that there is brand standards when it comes to real estate. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. You should have all brand standards within your box, I'll call it, or within your system, but you also need to establish brand standards when it comes to real estate. Okay, I'm going to pause on that, I'm going to table that, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. So those are the things that are important for you to think about as far as a franchisor. The other things when looking for real estate and finding a real estate company, whether you use us, and I'm happy to talk to you later, or anybody else, the things that you need to talk about are, as a franchisor, you want control, right? At least I know I want to have control. Probably a little bit too much as a micromanager. I want to make sure that I know everything that is going on, and I specifically want to know real estate-wise where they're going to be. And I actually have to physically walk through a site before someone signs a lease. That is just on me for our own brand. So controls, brand standards from a franchisor's perspective is very important when it comes to thinking about real estate for your franchisees. Now, for your franchisees, here's what you need to think from your franchisees. They want a really good deal, right? And they also want to be in the most visible location possible. So that visibility is something that might be or may not be a brand standard. But here's, as a real estate company, here's what I tell everyone when I start working with a new franchisor and they introduce me to a franchisee that we work with, one of the very first things that I tell them is, my job is to set expectations. To set expectations of each franchisee that we work with. That's why people hire us, because we have a great ability to speak franchise. And I think by the end of February, I will be the only real estate broker in the country that has the designation of being a certified franchise expert. So I'm very, very happy about that one. So I love the ability to set expectations with people and tell franchisees, I don't want you to be an expert in real estate. I want you to be an expert on learning the operations of the business and the systems that you just bought into, and you need to trust the process of the real estate experts that you hire, no matter who they are, no matter what company. The last thing that you want to do is send your franchisee loose on Zillow or anything else online, right? They're just going to go down a rabbit hole. You want them to focus on how to be the best franchisee in their system, right? So difference of perspectives for what everyone looks for. Now, let's talk about those brand standards, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk a little bit about franchise agreements and things we want to make sure that we have inside of an LOI. All right. So what does that look for? All right. Brand standards, whenever it comes to figuring out real estate for each and every one of your brands, are lease versus own. Right. Most of us here are probably going to be going down the lease route for many reasons. A, it's a lot less expensive, right? It's very capital intensive for your franchisees to be owning their real estate. Within our Ivybrook Academy concept, we do have that. It's very, very small. I would say, I think we've got maybe 4 people out of 64, and we don't have 64 franchisees. We have 46 franchisees for 64 territories. So it's a small percentage of people that can actually afford that. So lease is probably going to be the route that everyone's going to look at. And then we got to look at square footage requirements. There is a brand that I'm not going to name, and they're not in the audience, that we just signed on last week, and they have 7 different locations. I'm trying very hard to be PC and not mentioning the industry or the name of the company right now. And they have 7 different locations. They're all company locations, company run. They're just getting into franchising. They have a couple candidates on the hook. And as I was doing, when we sign on a new franchisor, we go through about an hour-and-a-half interview of exactly finding out what a franchisor's brand standards are. And you would be surprised how many people, they haven't thought about that yet. So we help them figure that out for them. And that's part of our job, to had that discovery process. All 7 of their locations couldn't be any more different on real estate. Some have it's in the food industry. Some have a drive-through, some don't. Some are inline, some are end cap. Some are 1,500 square feet. Some are 8,000 square feet. Some are in a town center. Some are in a strip mall. It's a problem. And when I said we need to come up with brand standards so we know what to look for, I thought he must have thought I was from Jupiter. Like that was like the craziest thing they thought of. So thinking of those things of square footage is a really big deal. Now, when you throw a dart at the map and say, I need, let's just say, 3,000 square feet, you need to have some ability to ebb and flow. There needs to be a plus or minus there. And I'm typically going to say when a concept comes to me and says, I need 3,000 square feet, I'm going to say, I'm going to bring everything between 2,000 to 4,000 square feet to you. And then let's figure out what fits the mold and what does not fit the mold. Let's not exclude things that are too high or too low prematurely. All right, but having some type of range in mind is really important because you need to identify and KPIs. What should the rent factor be? What is the max rent factor that we can pay to make sure that we have unit economics for all of our franchisees? Because at the end of the day, happy franchisees are those that make money, and as Mark said earlier, happy franchisees validate, they want to buy more locations, and they require less support time. Okay, so rent factor, big deal. Let's also talk about brand consistency of what to look for even within inside the real estate. The paint colors, flooring, all of those things you should have a manual for, your brand standards manual. If you don't have a national construction company, I'm happy to advise you to a couple of them that have done a great job for us over the years. One in particular has done a bang-up job. But I say this with an example of why brand standards within real estate, especially interior, are so critical and so important. I'm going to have a story. Back in the 1960s, there was a pizza concept from the Midwest. They had about a dozen different locations, and they couldn't understand why some locations were more popular than others. They weren't franchising as fast as they wanted to, and there was a concept out in Arizona in the 1960s, mid-1960s. It was called Shakey's Pizza. I don't even know if it's still around. And they were absolutely crushing it out there. So the 2 owners of this concept went out there to do some mystery shopping that we talked about earlier today, and did some mystery shopping on Shakey's. They sat down and the place was just booming. It was packed from wall to wall. As they sat down and they ordered their pizza, they asked the waitress, "Is it always this busy?" And the waitress said, "Yes, all of our locations are this busy." And they asked why. And to this day, I believe the waitress said, because it is more or less, she translated to brand consistency. It looks the same everywhere you go. So then these 2 owners realized that they needed brand standards and consistency even within the brick and mortar, not just the recipe. So then they went back and they discovered that all the footprints need to be the same size, and they put a red metal roof on all of their pizza locations moving forward. Hence, Pizza Hut hit national franchising like a hot streak overnight. You're laughing because you probably know the story, right? So how about that? So real estate does come into play of that consistency, and it tells the story of your brand to your consumers. So not only your processes, your systems, your products, your services, but your identity tells the story as well. Last 2 things, I told Jessica I love to talk. So I hope that I give her the mic in the next 45 minutes. Make sure that you have a good real estate broker. All right. I think that kind of goes without saying, and I'm not saying that just because I'm here on this panel. And also make sure you have a good real estate attorney. Your real estate attorney should really be reviewing your leases before anyone signs anything. The ability to have legal review is extremely important. We don't let anyone sign a lease in our company without having that done first. Last two things to think about is new space versus second generation space. Okay, and let me translate. New construction, a new construction space or a spec builder building out a warm vanilla shell for you versus a second generation space. Let's just use the pizza concept. There was a former restaurant, moved out, and you can move your new pizza concept in there. There are pros and cons with both. The new space, everybody, including Ivybrook franchisees, they love that new car smell, right? Who doesn't love the new car smell? It looks good, smells good. It's in a brand new location. Man, it is hot, right? Who doesn't love that? It also comes with the highest rent you can possibly find under planet Earth. It is going to be very, very high, and landlords know about that. Second generation spaces means somebody has used the space before. It is going to be lower rent, and it is going to be a lower economics to get in there. Now, what comes with both of those is something called TI, or tenant improvement dollars. So this is the money that a landlord contributes to helping build out the space to your brand standards or what you want your franchisee. In new construction, I tell all of our clients, it is a seesaw effect. I can get you really, really low rent, or I can get you really, really high TI. Of course, we're going to try for both, but what is the most important? And every franchisee might differ, even though you might always want to say, hey, I want really, really low rent because it's going to make my item 19 look the best, right? I don't disagree with that as a franchisor standpoint, but you got to ebb and flow a little bit with what is best for your franchisee, all right? They might not have as much capital to be able to build out the space, so there's a trade-off there. So take those things into consideration. Next, I believe on our list is, let's talk about franchise agreement provisions, documents, and really what we should be addressing in real estate issues. I had Richie was helping us out on this one, Jessica. Didn't you have that on your notes? Okay. So the two things that we have here to talk about are, a lease rider. How important is a lease rider for you as a franchisor to make your franchisees have? All right. Number two is, how about the option to purchase their assets upon termination? Okay. That one I'm going to punt probably to Jessica and Richie. As far as the lease rider, I find that to be very important. A lot of our larger brands do have that. Essentially, it is a 3-page document that you turn in with your LOI that the landlord signs that says that the franchisor, I'm going to be watering this down a little bit, probably too much. The franchisor has first right to that space should franchisee ever go out of business. So if let's just use Shakey's Pizza, you're a Shakey's Pizza franchisor. If you want, this banging location, in Crabtree, wherever we are, Raleigh, to have Shakey's Pizza above the front door, even though the franchisee wants to go out of business, and you want to keep Shakey's Pizza in that place, then it gives you as the franchisor to basically, correct me if I'm wrong, assume the lease or take over the lease. In some situations, says my legal counsel.
If the landlord will agree to it.
If the landlord will agree to it, which I think is a great thing, because if it's an A+ location, you don't want to get rid of it. I know it sounds like an absolute pain, but you might want to think about, running the location for a brief period of time as a franchisor, maybe hiring that manager on to be able to retain somebody so you can find another new franchisee to be able to slip right into that location. So there's many benefits. Number one, you don't close a location. Number two is you really don't want that in your FDD, if at all possible, to not have a closure. So is that Richie? Richie, yes?
Right. And exactly right. I would just add to that. Ultimately, each of your franchise agreements has a non-compete in it, right? But in some states, like California, it would practically be malpractice to try to enforce the non-compete because of their statutes. So ultimately, controlling the real estate and then the assets pertaining thereto is your ultimate protection against any nullification of the non-compete, because I can take that space. And what is it the franchisee wants to do? Using the case study example, the rogue franchisee is they want to be able to take the sign down and leverage the goodwill associated with your brand and be something else. But they can't do that because the lease writer is going to say, if your lease is terminated or your franchise agreement is terminated, I have the option, but not the obligation for me or for one of my franchisees to step into the void and take over that location.
And also the lease writer does contain some additional protections. As you said, you get your brand identity, and you will have things of making sure that, again, this is more retail, but that you have the exclusive of perhaps your own pizza place. You want to be the only pizza place in that shopping center, and certain the provisions that should be across the board for each of those franchisees. And in addition, and again, Drew's a public speaker. I'm not. I'm the third attorney. He deals with paper all the time, so that's why he was kind of
Oh, it's in my
Oh, sorry. Again, I'm not the public speaker here. So, and on those franchise writers, in addition, what it's important is that, as I said, if you do need to assign the lease, you have that ability to assign it to another franchisee. And then also the landlord potentially has an overriding lien right over that property, so the franchisor wants to make sure that if there is an event of default, it has the ability to go in and to cure that default and then take over, and so that the tenant does not lose the space and then lose any of the improvements that it has made to the space, because the landlord does have that right to do that under the lease. And then what I know more about, which I'll go ahead and go to, is more of the letter of intent and really what you're looking for when you're entering into a lease with a landlord. And again, as Drew mentioned, the most important thing is to go ahead and have a broker in place when you're trying to find space, and that broker understands what you need. Because once you have an LOI and once it gets to someone like me who's reviewing it, we don't really get to make changes to it. So if your broker is not doing a good job, then I can't do as a good job as I could have, because what a landlord will see is adding additional business terms of things that should have already been addressed, because you're going to know when you initially deal with that landlord whether or not they're going to meet those expectations. And some of the things that, in my mind, again, like generally speaking, of course, the lease term is important, the rental rate, the TI allowance, and as Drew mentioned, the TI allowance is typically tied to the rate, which will change whether or not it's first or second generation space. But with that allowance, how long are they going to give you to build out that space? Because as of right now, we've had a huge shift in our market, and where a